Paula. Thanks for, excuse me. Thanks for submitting your design to the additional instructor video critique. You're off to a good start on a few things, and I see one or two things we could work on, okay? The first thing I wanted to mention is I really like that you did something different with your heading. It's not all on the same line, reading left to right all the way across. You have a really cool downward movement, which helps add flow, and then there's a good amount of white space on both sides, which I really, really like. Also, creative little touch like this orange ampersand is appreciated and kind of adds a little bit of depth to your design. So good job with that. A few things I would recommend is I probably would go maybe a little bit bigger with the words great and precious, or a little bit smaller with exceeding and promises. Because right now, exceeding and promises are much more legible than great and precious, even though great and precious is so much bigger. The fact that it's a script makes it a little bit hard to read. And I really like the script, so good job with that. But I would probably make this maybe 75% to 50% the size it is right now. And I would actually probably bump exceeding right here. So it's horizontally aligned. You have kind of this cool gap in the word, and exceeding would look really good right here. So exceeding great and precious promises, because it's really neat how you have promises tucked right underneath it like that. So that would kind of mimic it up here. And then I would put and in the background. Right now it's on top of great, and usually you want elements like that, even though it has some cool color, usually you want them behind the actual words, okay? So good start with that. Just a few fine-tuning things will help push it to the next level. In the video that I put on our class page, let's see which week was it? I think it was this past week. Yeah, this video, I actually show you how to create your leading letter where it dips down as opposed to going up. And so it's an option. Let's see if I can open up. It's an option that you will find in the, scooch this over, paragraph palette right here, okay? And that's going to create a kind of cool effect. It might not work too well here. Yeah, it's not going to work well there because this isn't a paragraph, but this is going to increase that initial letter and make it have the same effect as what you're going for, but just done the technically correct way by having it dip down instead of go above. Also, I'd probably do something about these numbers here. In the character palette, you should be able to find something that will move them up as a footnote as opposed to having them be just really big numbers that are a little bit distracting. Be sure to turn off your hyphens. You always want to turn off hyphens for any design that you're doing. And then pay attention to some weird formatting things, like I think this is maybe you just accidentally hit enter after because responsibilities is split in half. All right, so that's going to help a little bit there. You have your subheadings, which you needed to have. Those are really nice. You have your pull quote. This is looking really good. You have a great amount of space between where the word ends and where the color ends, which is ideal. And then you have your image here, which is good. So let's see. I would eliminate this last line. You want it to end with a period as opposed to in the middle of a sentence. You could even eliminate this last section and bring these columns in because I think it's a little bit distracting to have these two end so closely together. If you had more overlap with this shape, maybe if it came to the rule of thirds and split the page in threes, and you made this a little bit lighter so this was really, really fully legible on top of it, you could do that. But as it is right now, I think it's a little bit too close to have this shape end not that many letters past where your paragraph begins, where your column begins. And so if you eliminate this additional paragraph at the end, that might give you a little bit more room to either pull this column in so it's tucked tidily inside, or you know, if you pulled it over, that wouldn't apply as much, but it would give you a little bit more white space maybe at the bottom or at the top. You could maybe even make this typeface a little bit smaller. That's one thing that we don't realize in magazines, that they do a lot. Let me show you on the example, is the typeface is actually a lot smaller than we think it is. When we come into it, we think we need to have the typeface be 12, 13, 14, but actually we can get away with doing a size 10 typeface maybe, or a size 11. So we don't have to have these huge typefaces. So that will help add more white space to your page as well. For example, this is kind of hard to see since it's a small one, but if we zoom in, you can see that this actually looks pretty small, these columns, and the typeface looks pretty small compared to how much white space you have on the sides. Look at how much white space there is in the middle of the page for this fold. Okay, so that might be something good for you to do as well. Pull these columns over. And last week when I was talking about that design which I did with the albino blue bonnets, or actually I think it was this past week, you'll notice that there was a large amount of white space between everything. Okay, so that is something that I think will help your design. I'm going to put this back so it's not gigantic, is making sure you have a little bit more room between the columns, and a little bit more room possibly where the column ends and the end of the page is. It's not really bad right now. It would just feel even more professional to possibly have that font size a little bit smaller, and maybe a little bit more room between here and the edge of the page. Okay. I thought of something else I wanted to tell you. Oh, your images. Okay, so I like this image. I might even like it more, even bigger. So that's something to consider as well. Maybe you could make this a little bit larger. And this one is a little bit difficult for me because generally I have a rule that you never want an element to end or to be cut off where it doesn't naturally end. So on this chest, I can't tell if this is actually the end of the chest or if you cut it right here. It looks like it might end there because it has a little bit of a kind of three-dimensional element to it. But on the top here, you haven't fully selected it. So I'm not sure if you did this in Photoshop and you know how to use Photoshop. If that's the case, then I would go back in and reselect this really crisp along the edges, no background. Okay, I would curve it up, keeping whatever the top part of this is. So a little bit extra here, I'm assuming, around, down, fully following the edge of the trunk. And same thing with the pearls. I would come up really crisp, select around here with your selection tool. Okay, so I would recommend doing that if you know how to do it. If you use something different to select this and you're not quite sure how to do that, that's a little bit of a different situation. And in that case, I'm not quite sure exactly what I would recommend. We could play around with a few things if you want to email me. But really, that's what this needs. It's too little amount of background for it to look good. And so it needs to just be a nice crisp selection to the trunk and the pearls as opposed to any of this background. And you need to definitely follow the line of the trunk. I feel like it might look better if you bump this over to the right side of the page. So the trunk and the bottom of the trunk is off the page, and then you're following the rule of flowing onto the page. See, because right now your eye is hitting this and it's moving off the page, off the left of the page. If you had the edge of the trunk off the right side of the page, your eye is going to flow and it's going to lead you to read the paragraph. So if you can do that, I think that would be better, and then you would just select this part again. You could even move this part off of the page and just have maybe 2/3 of the trunk and the pearls, something along those lines. So I would work on this selection a little bit. I actually really like this image. And I can see you've done some selection to it, so I know there's some of that ability there. If not, you might just need to insert it as a square or something a little less fun, but that would make it look more professional than a partially selected trunk. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to mention is I feel like this yellow line is really neat, but I feel like it's kind of distracting where it's ending. especially on this word. If you bump it down and have exceeding here, you're not going to have to worry about that. But for example, up here, having it overlap just this little amount, it's the same thing I mentioned over here. It's called a tangent. So see like this F, how it's right on that line? This confuses your eye when you're looking at this and you don't know if this is a different letter. You don't know if it's one element when actually it's two. So you either want to have things really overlap or not overlap at all. And so this is a little bit too close. And so you could fix that by having it go all the way across the page, or you could fix it by making it a lot lighter so it feels like a watermark, which you could do with this color too. Um, and so I like that you're doing that. I really like that you have these two colors combined to make something darker. I don't think you need to do it on all 3 pages though. Maybe play around with doing something a little bit different on one of them, or maybe one of them is just white, or one of them is black. That could be cool with this black color here. So play around with doing something different so all 3 pages don't feel too similar and you're not running into the same problems on all 3 pages. Really, you're off to a great start. I think I mentioned turning off hyphens. Be sure to do that. Okay, so you're off to a great start, and also pay attention to these widows. You have a widow here, you have a widow here. Remember, you never want one word on a line all by itself. All right, and pay attention to formatting things. You have space between these paragraphs, space between these, but you don't have space between these paragraphs, okay? So maybe this one down here was just an accident or something. Maybe that happened because of the text wrap, possibly. Okay, so yeah, you're off to a good start. Just keep on working on a few final things, and you're going to be looking really, really nice. Okay, thanks so much. Bye.